We open with the shot of a starry night, which seemingly morphs into a zone known as the Abyss. A narration takes over to tell us that this abyss is a place where an infinite number of constellations and monsters are lurking. We see this almost immediately when a group of demon dragon heads are seen in a vicious rage. These dragon heads are going after a man floating in the middle of nothingness, and then we learn that the beast is a 7-headed dragon named Orge. The overpowered dragon heads proceed to attack the man, who is revealed to be our hero. He charges up his powers and begins an intense battle with the demon dragon, but he has a lot on his plate as he turns around to find another opponent. This beast is shown to be a devourer of planets named Volgan. Both Orge and Volgan are like the boss monsters of their own respective territories, and they seem to have come together to fight our hero who has encroached upon their private space. It's bad enough for him to take on a dragon and a beast at the same time, but the battle is interrupted by yet another monster. It is revealed to be a giant spider who spins his webs to capture and trap our hero. The spider's name is Adio, and his title is the Master of the Dimensional Hole. The demonic spider roars at our hero, but he simply replies with a smile on his face and a spark in his eyes. He goes on to explain that he's been fighting these monsters for about 300 years. After a long, arduous journey, he does manage to come out on top, but the amount of time that has passed is a bit too ridiculous. Obviously, it would have been easier if he was just fighting one monster at a time, but in a land of chaos, nothing is going to come easy. He figures that he needs to find a way back to Earth, because this is not a dimension for the faint-hearted. Suddenly, he is hit with a notification alert that bestows a new title upon him. Our hero is now worthy of the name, the undefeated avatar of training. It turns out that the world is in resonance, and this means that our hero is growing even more popular amongst its residents. To boost things even further, his power as a constellation has grown stronger. This must be a bit too much for us to take in, so the narration decides to give us some context. Basically, the origin of these constellations began when the Earth was first connected with the Abyss. This led the humans to realize that all their fairy tales and myths weren't just wishful fantasies, but rather harsh realities. Contrary to what the dictionary might tell us, a constellation is actually a supreme being who is so overpowered that humans would consider such people to be gods. These constellations had the appearance of angels and even brought positive energy and blessings with them. This led to an increase in popularity, so what happened next isn't something we humans would find surprising. With more souls dedicating their lives to these constellations, their authority would also grow, and it led to some unwarranted rivalries. Everyone likes followers, even the constellations, so they would end up fighting each other to steal followers into their own abyss. Of course, since the Earth was home to over 10 billion souls, it literally served as a jackpot to such supreme beings. Eventually, the constellations would get divided, and it led to the birth of evil, greedy constellations who would rather get their followers by force than blessings. Now that we've understood the general vibe of this timeline, we go back to our hero who finally decides to end the suspense and give us his name. He is called Choi, and it seems like he's one of the younger constellations in this story. He is also a good guy, who is here to stop the evil constellations from fulfilling their dark desires. Now, we move back to a beautiful scenery of the Abyss, where our hero is seen in a forward motion. Basically, it's a quick recap of the battle he just had with the demon dragon, overpowered beast, and spider monster. Nothing really changes here, apart from the fact that Choi is shown with more clarity while fighting his opponents. After these proceedings are shown, our hero decides to carry out some breathing exercises. But it's not for what we think it is. Instead of battling more constellations, our hero is actually cooking some meat, and he's trying to figure out when to flip the patty on his frying pan. Now, we see one of Choi's followers, who is amazed by the frying pan he is using. The undefeatable avatar of training explains that the pan is made of a special metal called adamantium, which is an all too familiar name. The follower then reveals to us that the meat patty being cooked actually comes from the Devourer of Planets, which was the beast Choi was fighting not too long ago. To defeat the beast is one thing, but to cook its meat for dinner is a whole other flex. The follower is shown to be the king of the Goblin Kingdom, and his name is the Great Mage Odagon. He also notices something strange about the butter being used for the patty, because it's emitting a strange kind of magic. Choi takes some time to remember where it came from, but eventually states that he got it from a constellation who took the form of a cow. Basically, he was allowed to live in exchange for its milk, and it clearly seems to be working out for Choi. Odagon is simply amazed to hear how his master managed to fight multiple constellations at the same time. But this is no big deal for Choi, because food is important to him. Choi further explains that he's doing his best to come up with the best ingredients, even if it means having to get them from giant monsters. The only reason for such a passion is because Choi has been living in the abyss for tens of thousands of years, and it's only now that he's found a decent hobby. Our hero knows that the constellation butter is extremely precious, but it's the first time he's having meat in over 300 years, so the occasion deserves some celebration. As Choi takes a bite of his yummy meal, Odegan watches on in shock and amazement because he's never heard of a constellation demanding servitude from his beaten opponent. Choi offers some of his food to Odegan, but he seems to consider this to be some kind of blessing. Anyway, the Goblin King takes a bite of the bear steak, and it seemingly triggers some kind of shock reaction. Odegan's entire body lights up, as if he's evolving into a supreme life form. This is because of a mixture between the constellation's meat, butter, and of course, Choi's cooking material, which has managed to keep the essence of the food intact. Odegan's mana circle runs wild, and he makes a drooling face to showcase his appreciation to Choi. On the other hand, our hero is a bit scared of Odegan because of his dramatic reaction. He comments that he will never be able to understand goblins, and thinks back to his time on Earth. This was tens of thousands of years ago, as per Abyss time, which means it's impossible to even consider how much time has passed on Earth. Now, we're taken to a flashback where Choi is seen bench pressing some weights. He is asked by his teacher as to why he's doing this, and he responds by saying he wants to increase his strength. In a hilarious twist, the teacher reveals that Choi is actually in a literature class right now, which makes his entire exercise irrelevant. The other teachers don't even bother with this, because they know our hero is a lost cause. Now, we move further into the past where it is shown that Choi was obsessed with his strength ever since he was a little boy. This is because he is an orphan, so it made sense for him to train his body for self-defense. During this time, Choi was actually a C-rank hunter, which means he's nowhere as strong right now when compared to the earlier fight. Anyway, hunters became a new job role after the connection to the Abyss, and it was an easy way for powerful people to earn some cash. Now, we see Choi with his leader who is warning him against going for a mission where he has to fight a B-rank monster. This is obviously not a good idea, as even C-rank monsters are a handful. But our hero argues that he can only become stronger if he faces off against stronger opponents. The leader tells Choi to focus on his life because he has a lover, but our hero reveals that he broke up with her not too long ago. The leader is curious to know the reason because Choi isn't exactly a weirdo, but his answer disappoints him. His girlfriend simply left him because he spent too much time training for monsters rather than for her. There's no romantic hope for our hero, so he channels his alpha male energy and sets out on his mission. One of the monsters breaks free and charges at Choi, so he uses his martial arts to counter it. The other warriors comment that hunters like Choi have it rough because they're not as effective as magic users. The warriors wonder why Choi didn't take the easy way out, but he had actually found a martial arts scroll from a dungeon one day, so he decided to train with it. Choi manages to defeat the monster with his powerful punches, and then we see him training yet again. He takes a break, but laments the fact that martial arts users like himself barely grow beyond the C rank. However, he doesn't lose hope and continues to train, even while he's dreaming. A mysterious voice asks him if he's aware of the situation, but Choi says this can count as image training. Our hero does want to know where this voice is coming from, and then a constellation shows up from the abyss. She reveals herself to be the goddess of balance who walks ahead, and Choi looks on in amazement. The goddess doesn't have much time to spare, so she gets straight to the point. She wants to make a contract with Choi, and goes on to explain why some might find this a strange proposition. However, our hero manages to stun even the goddess as he readily agrees to form the contract with her. She is unable to understand his motivation, but he simply says that he wants to become more powerful. Choi asks the goddess why she chose him, especially when there are stronger hunters than him. She states that she can predict the future, and she had an ominous vision where a great danger would approach the earth in a few years. The goddess saw the evil constellations sending their servants over to conquer Earth, and these monsters are nowhere near as easy to beat as the wannabes Choi was fighting till now. In order to lift the suspense from the situation, the goddess finally tells Choi that the key to preventing this catastrophe is him. Our hero is surprised by this revelation, but he is told that the Earth can be saved if the goddess trains him hard enough for the mission. Of course, this isn't going to be an easy task, and will require a lot of hard work, but it will provide the appropriate results. To be honest, even she was scared up until this point, so Choi's decision is definitely not as easy as he made it look. If he was the only hunter who was ready to accept this contract, what does our hero have to lose from it? And how the heck did he find himself trapped in the abyss for tens of thousands of years? These are important questions, but you'll just have to wait for the answers. Like, share, and subscribe if you want to see everything unfold in the next video. See you soon.